By the late 1970s, Pink Floyd stood at the very peak of their commercial and artistic power. The band had conquered the rock world with The Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here, becoming one of the most respected and financially successful acts on the planet. But behind the polished soundscapes and grand live performances, the relationships within the group were eroding. The journey toward the wall did not begin in a moment of unity. It began in a climate of tension, resentment, and diverging visions for the future. After Wish You Were Here in 1975, cracks began to show. The sessions for that record had been difficult, marked by a sense of creative fatigue and disconnection. Richard Wright's contributions were already being questioned. Nick Mason was losing confidence in his drumming, and David Gilmour was increasingly frustrated by Roger Waters' growing dominance in the songwriting process. Waters, who had taken a leading role since Dark Side, was beginning to shape the band's identity almost entirely around his own concepts. This shift was subtle at first, but by the time Animals came in 1977, the balance of power had shifted dramatically. Animals was more political, more cynical, and more lyrically aggressive than anything the band had done before. Waters had written most of the material and dictated much of the production. The album was critically acclaimed, but the sessions were toxic. Gilmour and Wright clashed with Waters over arrangements, tempos, and even the mood of certain songs. Mason, caught in the middle, tried to keep the peace but contributed little to the creative process. By the end of the Animals tour, the atmosphere within Pink Floyd was poisonous. The massive stadium shows left Waters feeling alienated from the audience, famously inspiring the concept of building a literal and metaphorical wall between the band and their fans. When work on the wall began in December 1978, the situation was already primed for disaster. Waters arrived with a complete, detailed concept for a double album, a sprawling narrative about isolation, trauma, and the breakdown of personal connections. He envisioned every note, every lyric, and every production choice fitting into his vision. Britannia Row Studios, which the band had built for themselves, became the war zone where this vision would be realized. From the start, tensions ran high. Waters demanded absolute precision from everyone, criticizing even minor mistakes. Gilmour, who had always taken pride in shaping the band's sound through improvisation and collaborative ideas, felt pushed aside. The decision to split the recording across multiple locations, from Britannia Row in London to Super Bear Studios in the south of France, and later to the producer's workshop in Los Angeles, did nothing to ease the strain. Each move was meant to improve workflow, but it often only deepened the divisions. Waters and producer Bob Ezrin began working closely on the album's structure and arrangements, while Gilmour focused on perfecting guitar parts in isolation. Wright, already struggling with personal issues, was increasingly absent and unmotivated. Mason, battling personal problems of his own, was reduced to playing to a click track with minimal creative involvement. By mid-1979, the tension between Waters and Wright reached a breaking point. Waters accused Wright of contributing almost nothing to the album, questioning his commitment and musicianship. Ezrin backed Waters' assessment, and Gilmour, though sympathetic to Wright, did little to stop what came next. In an unprecedented move for a band at their level, Waters demanded Wright's dismissal. The rest of the band reluctantly agreed, with one strange twist. Wright was allowed to finish the Wall tour as a paid session musician, earning a set wage while no longer being an official member of Pink Floyd. It was a humiliating demotion for someone who had co-founded the band over a decade earlier. The emotional fallout was severe. Wright withdrew almost entirely from the creative process, barely speaking to Waters. Gilmour became more distant, focusing on his guitar work but refusing to engage in the power struggle. Mason's role continued to diminish, his drumming recorded under tight supervision and heavy editing. In the end, much of The Wall became a Roger Waters project in everything but name, a vision executed with the precision of a dictator at the cost of the band's unity. Yet, paradoxically, the results were extraordinary. When The Wall was released in November 1979, it became a massive success, topping charts worldwide and eventually selling over 30 million copies. The live shows were revolutionary, with elaborate stage sets, animations, and the iconic construction of an actual wall on stage. But for the members of Pink Floyd, success brought no reconciliation. If anything, it deepened the divides. Waters saw the album as validation of his control. Gilmour resented that his contributions were overshadowed. Wright, though earning more on the tour as a salaried player than his bandmates, remained bitter over his expulsion. Mason drifted further into the background. The Wall's legacy is complex. On one hand, it stands as one of rock's greatest achievements, an ambitious, daring, and deeply personal work that redefined what an album could be. On the other hand, it marked the moment when Pink Floyd ceased to be a true band. The trust and collaboration that had fueled their earlier masterpieces were gone, replaced by a strict hierarchy and creative dictatorship. The recording of The Wall didn't just turn them against each other. It effectively ended Pink Floyd as the world had known them. In the years that followed, the fallout continued. Waters would push for even more control on the final cut, which many considered his solo album in all but name. Gilmour and Mason would eventually carry on without him, bringing Wright back into the fold. But the fractures from the Wall sessions were never fully repaired. Even decades later, the wounds remained visible in interviews and rare reunions. In rock history, The Wall is remembered for its scale, ambition, and influence. But for the men who made it, the recording process was a brutal, soul-draining experience that left permanent scars. Behind every note, there's a story of control, resentment, and betrayal. The price Pink Floyd paid for creating one of the most celebrated albums of all time.